Hey homies, what's up? Ryan Wynn here with another episode of Late Night Inks. And tonight our special guest is Mishka from Divinity 2. This is a Divinity 2 sketch cover from issue 1 from Valiant Comics. I was the inker on this book. Matt Kent was the writer, Trevor Hare signed the penciler, and my homie David Barron colored it. Now Mishka was one tough character. She was found on the streets of Russia as a kid. Let's see if I can do this without knocking the camera. Eating a rat. There we go. Beautiful. And then later on, she does some pretty gnarly stuff. She puts together her own spaceship and then proceeds to use one of the co-pilots or one of her fellow astronauts as an energy source by stabbing him through with the spaceship. You know, some kind of weird magic technology. If you read the story, it makes a little more sense, but pretty dark stuff. And it kind of reminded me of a penciler I dealt with once who said that he wanted to have me do my best inks for him so that we could have the best sales and he could get the best gig. And then when he got to a certain point, he would ink himself so that he could get all the royalties. And I was like, yeah, hey, why don't you just do that yourself, and I will not be your energy source. So we are going to be inking with our trusty 8404 size 2 Raphael, Kalinsky Sable, all that. We have dipped 2/3 to halfway. We've wiped or sharpened the brush on the inside edge of a jar. I have done an extensive amount of warming up. Hopefully you have too. Some videos we do warm-ups, some videos we don't. And we're going to try and do this in one, maybe 2 videos. I'd like to do the outline and most of the contours, whatever, most of the details, and then maybe save the eyes and the energy bursts for a second video tomorrow. So we are ready with the brush. We've got a slightly different camera setup going with a different lighting setup. We're going to see if it works for us. And away we go. I'm going to start right in the center here. It's a little bit more of a cartoony version. She's got this tiny little chin. It's not super realistic. I'm going to go for some bolder lines and then some very thin rendering and cross-hatching lines. Not something I do all the time on my own work, but something I thought suited this piece. All right, quit talking and get to inking, Ryan. So it was kind of funny when Divinity 2 came out is when I think people realized that in Divinity 1 the character's name was not Divinity, even though we all still kind of call him Divinity. His name is Abram and her name is Mishka, so she's not really called Divinity 2. So that was kind of a funny realization. No one ever talked about it either. Everyone just assumed that Abram was Divinity. Now she's super nasty at first. I don't necessarily want to spoil everything, but if you're here, you're either already a Valiant fan and you know the story, or you're an inker and you just want to learn about inking and you don't really care about Valiant stuff. But anyways, where in the first Divinity, Abram comes back from space with the powers of a god, and he is benevolent, meaning he is peaceful. Anyone that comes at him, no matter how hard they come at him, he gives them what they want. So he searches inside their soul and gives them something that brings them peace. Mishka comes back, and she's like full-blown evil commie lady. She's like a Stalin fan, and she goes back in time and deals with Stalin and helps them take over the world, helps Russia win World War II, which Russia kind of did, but helps them take over, I should say, after World War II. And it's quite interesting. And it was funny because Matt had written it all a long time before any of the 2016 Russian bot stuff was a thing, but it was coming out around that time. And a lot of people thought it was supposed to be like kind of meta or something like that, and it was just totally a coincidence. Alright, so sometimes I'm a little weary of inking on an old sketch cover. They use pretty decent Bristol board for these, but it's been in a bin in a comic box with other sketch covers tightly packed for years now. What that does to the paper fibers is that that mashes them down, and it doesn't quite accept the pen or the brush the same way. And what I can see here is that there's a little bit of it's almost like watery, almost like it's like watercolor. There's parts where it's not taking to the paper quite. I don't think you can see that on there. Oops, sorry about that. But that's because the paper has been almost burnished down, so it's glossier and it doesn't want to accept the ink as much. But it does it well enough. And I'm not going to erase too harshly. And the Rapidograph ink I'm using, it stays pretty black. So we'll see when it's done. But I'm also going over some of the lines multiple times like that. Alright, see these big curve lines? You're actually barely doing anything. You're just turning your wrist like that. Excuse me. So your wrist is only moving that much. It's going doot doot. But at the end of your wrist, it's just like this. So the brush moves that much, but your wrist down here only moves that much. So don't get so intimidated by some of these big lines like that, big curved lines. They're easier than you think. Alright, we've got our head done. Now the brush is a little low on ink, so we can't do heavy lines, but that's a good time to come in here and do these thin lines that make up the edge of her costume. Now if I was going much more detailed, this would sort of have a piping to it, so it'd be 2 lines. As an astronaut's uniform has piping to it, but we're going simple. It's a sketch cover. We're going to even break up this line a little bit to help indicate the light source coming from above. Alright, let's load up our brush a little bit. Wipe it on the inside edge of the jar. And then let's do a few little lines here for those neck muscles. And then the outline. Flip it around, do the same thing. I know these little necklines aren't contour lines, and I always say do the contours first, but I also like to take advantage of when I'm in a certain area. Use the real estate. So I was already over here, do that, already there, do that. Going to be moving the lines in the same direction. But now we're back to the contour. So now this line is going to be more than a wrist. This is going to get a little bit of a wrist and an elbow movement. And there's a little fuzz on the brush, caused a little line to go over there. We can fix that with whiteout, or we can just thicken that line up a little. And that's what we'll do. Oh, and look at that. I smudged a little bit right there. I thought about that happening, and then it happened. All right, we'll do the same thing there. Just beef that guy up. Now, what you want to do when you do lines like that and you're going to meet up against a line like this, you still want to continue the movement. So you're going to want to bam and lift and kind of keep moving. Otherwise, you can cross over and you can white out. That's kind of the old school way. But if you want to get good, you got to learn about follow through. And we're going to follow through here. And we're going to land the airplane really quick and push down. Because I would start the movement before I hit, so that I have that follow through feel. Now let's see, this long one, I may want to throw that line from this direction, but we're gonna give stuff a second to dry because I don't want to smudge again in front of you guys. That's pretty embarrassing. What we can do is come in here and do this underlying piece of her mohawk. Funny story about the Divinity character mohawks. Trevor the penciler had forgotten to put it on the main character in the first issue. I thought it was a purposeful choice, and the colorist did too, so we didn't say anything. And the editors were so involved with the story and the storytelling that they didn't notice. So then they had to make it a thing that he rebuilt his costume, and when he did that, he had the mohawk. So it was funny in this issue when she does it, they just kind of brush over it. They just gloss over it, like, oh, yep, nope. When you get these powers of a god, you have a cool mohawk that matches your Russian space cosmonaut uniform. All right, loading up the brush again, sharpening it on the edge. I'm gonna take a sip of water. We are doing pretty good on time. Excuse me there. Now we have all these folds underneath here, but I'm going to save those for a big wet black brush. Yeah, you like it when I say that, huh? All right. Mind out of the gutter, back into the ink jar. Now we're going to do a long line on this rim of her space costume. Uniform. Because it's got a hard edge, a hard ridge, where the dome, the space dome helmet, kind of rests on it. So we'll close that off, and then the rest is cloth underneath. And we have these, they're not filled in black, I just did these overlapping oval shapes. And when we get into those in the next video, I believe it'll be the next video, I'll explain folds, how they overlap, and how folds in cloth are similar to rocks and rock formations and things like that. All right, did you hear my chair pop? My chair pops and makes weird noises sometimes like that. All right, you know what? I think we're gonna do these with this same brush. We're just gonna really load it up with water, or ink, not water. It's actually, my ink is pretty wet. So let's see. So you'll see what I meant about overlapping shapes. I do mine a little bit cartoony. I round out everything. I don't go for completely realistic folds. But you'll have that black shape there, and then you'll make this ovally shape that crosses under the other one like that. And then you'll come over here on this side again. You do a smaller version of that first one under here that doesn't touch that guy. We'll fill that in. Yeah, this paper really doesn't want to take the ink. It's really burnished down. And then we'll come back over here and do a slightly different shape. And I think you can start to see how that's folds. And if you can imagine this being, these black chunks being angular and jagged, you could sort of see how it's rock formations. And I could do that here. So it's all about the crisscrossing pattern that you create, very simply like this. And it's the same thing in rocks and pants. You'll just do varying forms and shapes like that. And you maybe even add in a secondary one there. It's lighter as you go to the top. And then with pants, you have a leg, say, and here's the bottom. And it's the same kind of crisscrossing folds like that. So that's kind of a crash course in how folds and rocks work. And as I figure out how to teach you guys inking better, I'm going to figure out better ways of explaining how things are similar like that. So I've got a few more I want to do here, outside edge, kind of thin ones where the image is dying out. Kind of like that, like it's fading. All right. Well, I think that's pretty good for one episode. We got a little bit of story about Mishka. You got a little bit of story about me. You got a little bit of a story about inking, and we're going to continue tomorrow with the face, these energy lines, and then I'm not sure what kind of pen we're going to go in and do this rendering with. Better look at it there. And all of this rendering up here, this thin cross hatching and stuff. Might do it with a brush, might break out the brush marker. But until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and take it easy. And if you haven't already, head over to alternaaccess.com and check out the book I wrote, Gods and Gears, with art by Dean Kotz and letters by Wes Loker. Issue 4 is out soon.
Stupid cat.
Newsprint. It's a hell of a drug.